Good evening, folks. Welcome to another edition of Assembly of Excellence. I am your host for this evening, Deep Entropy, last of a writer's creed. Peace, blessings, glory, praise, and honor be to the Most High. Thank you for being in attendance. It is an honor and a privilege to be in front of you guys one more time to have the conversations, to talk about the uncomfortable truths, to expose the lies, and to put everything on the forefront for the people, by the people. Shout out to my content creators, my writers, my singers, everyone that's doing the 9 to 5, everyone who is struggling to make a better life for themselves and for their loved ones. Continue to fight, continue to be strong, continue to trust in the process and to trust in the higher power that is the creator. We have a special live for you tonight. Each individual that I am bringing up has more than gone above and beyond in terms of intellect, in terms of being human, showing empathy, being completely honest and blunt and straightforward, which we absolutely appreciate and respect and admire the most over here on this side of the internet. I look forward to what we dive into tonight. If you're not familiar with these souls, you will be when it's all said and done. Miss Martz, Mr. Matthews, hello and good evening.
Hello, good evening.
Hey, Melvin, how's it going? Great to be here.
Always a pleasure to sit across from adults who know how to be and conduct themselves like adults. How is everybody
Please
doing?
don't accuse me of being an adult. I haven't yet demonstrated that yet. So I refuse to be put in the pigeonholed in that criteria, young man.
At least you being honest. Hey, I still have my childlike ways here and there. So you're not alone, brother. You're not alone. It's all right. I would rather be 50 years old and still be able to go out here and play in the leaves than be 50 years old sitting in a rocking chair staring and yelling at the traffic.
True that. Absolutely true that. Yep.
Very true.
Miss Mart, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing extremely well, thank you. I'm feeling aligned and balanced, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Well, there's a reason why we are here. And so many people get into this situation. Families, friends, this confusion of being able to have the talk, the conversations, the dialogues, to getting the uncomfortable room and sit down with the person that you have a disagreement with, or sit down with the person or the partner that you are in the relationship with and talk about the things that you don't like, the behavior patterns, I'm talking about communication, specifically the key elements, the components, the structures that allow you to be freely who you are without no regrets, comfortable, capable, and able, and not afraid to say what you need to say, regardless of what the outcome is. Um, we'll start with you, Mark. How do you feel in 2024, just overall in general, um, in regards to the way that people communicate? Do you think that it's gotten better? Has it gotten worse? Has it always been a mixture of both? What is your thoughts? How do you feel about this?
I think it just depends on you as the individual and kind of your focus and your communication patterns as well. I think that when you set a tone for yourself energetically, and you have boundaries in which kind of conversations, what kind of language, and what kind of discourse you are allowing and what you're not allowing, it doesn't give room to for a lot of people to disrespect you or to feel comfortable talking to you in any kind of way. The way that you kind of assert yourself and talk and lead, especially in conversations, sets the tone, right? A lot of the time people are going to be defensive. A lot of people have not integrated different aspects of themselves, especially traumas, and so a leader is going to be able to identify, like Jason was talking about leadership a little bit earlier off camera. A leader is going to be able to identify, what they see in these people, especially when it comes to situations or erroneous things that they've done, instead of just sitting there and saying, well, you're bad, you're this, because that's naming something, and that's an attack, which allows space for people to become victims. You work with the mentality and the mindset of it's us against the problem, right? And this also depends on the kind of relationship that you and that other person has. If it's a romantic relationship, I especially always implement it's us against the problem, right? If certain behavior patterns are continuing, then it's something that you talk about. You pull that other person aside and say, hey, this is a problem that I thought we were addressing. What is happening and what's going on within you that these things are not being addressed? A lot of the times, I find that mature conversations or a mature ability to converse, that is what tends to lack within like even my age group, because a lot of the times people feel like in a hyper individualized society, people feel like they don't owe people anything, right? Now with a lot more discourse and things like social media, people are seeing that like ghosting or just leaving a situation is not healthy, but it still doesn't change the fact that a lot of people feel like they don't owe people an explanation for their inactions or their inabilities. And so a lot of the times you either have to allow yourself to understand that the disrespect was the closure, or that maybe this person doesn't have the ability to have the conversation. That just, again, that depends on you reading the situation and understanding the situation as a leader. And unfortunately, here in this nation, I tend to find that it's up to women a lot of the time to lead certain conversations, a lot of hard conversations within relationships, and within spaces, because we are looking at things in an empathetic way and a logistical way. But then there are some of us who become like deeply emotional, and that's the same with men. Like men will say, oh, we're logical thinkers, and I'm like, no. A lot of the times men get emotional and let their emotions get the best of them in situations as well. And so balance within ourselves is what helps create balanced conversations and have an understanding that things are more nuanced always than they are black and white. It's up to each other, right, as collaborators, not compromisers, to create a shared understanding and a shared solution so that you guys can move forward.
There's one thing Well, you actually said a multitude of things, but there's one thing that you said that I think in the other cases it would be looked at completely different. Um, when you're in a relationship, it's you guys against the problem. I
Mm-hmm.
love that part because if I have a bad trait or the next person has a situation within themselves, typically a lot of times we get defensive.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to be told that an imperfection of ours is a problem because we've never really had to deal with it. If you've always been a know-it-all, or if you've always been spoiled and then someone is starting to kind of implement their own boundaries within the confines of the relationship, you find yourself getting uncomfortable instead of, hmm, maybe I am the problem. Maybe what I'm doing is hurting this relationship. Let me take a step back and look at myself. A lot of people don't want to do that. And so what ends up happening is you start to rebel against your partner, which is nuts
Mm-hmm.
because it's like you're in the relationship with the person because you found qualities within them that you thought were worthy of coming together as one. But then once you start to see these other imperfections, now that's when the real test comes. So instead of the person saying or me saying, all right, you're right, this I know there's things that I need to work on, so on and so on. How do you want to go about this? All right, you called it out. I know about it. How do we work on that? Or how do we get to a place to where I know how to control certain things a little bit better so you're not so disrespectful or feel disrespected, and we get into this back and forth over something that doesn't have to get out of control. And a lot of people do it, and it's not necessarily in a relationship either. So I just wanted to touch on that one specifically because I loved that. Attack the problem, not the person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's hard for a lot of people because in the beginning, you'll tell someone that, and then situation arises, and you might implement, hey, this is a boundary, and I know I see you and I hear you and all these things, and I still think you're wonderful, but this for me is a boundary. Can we respect this boundary for me? Boundaries are meant for people you want to keep in your life, not those you want to push away. If you don't implement a boundary, it's usually because you were ready to cut them off. You're usually just like, click, like, I'm gonna block you. Implementing a boundary is also telling someone, this is a wound for me, and this is something that's vulnerable for me, or this is something that I truly don't like. And in this world, we want to pretend to be perfect. Even in job spaces, even in community spaces, we don't share enough. Jason.
So, being someone who actually focuses a lot on boundaries and responsibilities, which are the two parts of what's known as the internal locus of control. Boundaries, as I use them, are it's for two purposes. One, it's to establish where none shall pass. This is all that I will tolerate, nothing more. It's also a filter for those who are willing to honor those boundaries, the ability to actually come into the life, and those who are not to stay out. And it basically becomes the test by which another person is validated, by which they are allowed to have communication with you. And even then, it only happens to a point. at some point there is a barrier. It was like you'll go no further because any further is an infringement upon me, and that's not allowed. And people who have well established boundaries, they can sometimes come off as people who are um, rigid, or they are they have no compassion. But that's only to the people who are looking to get something from someone. The ones who are looking for an actual connection, to communicate, to develop a relationship, will see the boundaries as being something that's healthy, as being like, this is my personal space. I will not give this of myself, because then it becomes a sacrifice. And there's no point in which a sacrifice is allowed, because if you sacrifice, then that's less that you have, that you of what you need. Eventually you get depleted and you're no good to anyone. So having that boundary that protects what is most important to you, and still allows you to be in communication with others, is vitally important. There's that zone, like in the solar system. There's a Goldilocks zone by which planets actually are able to sustain life. At the same point, there is a zone in which people are allowed into your life, the right kind of person. And if they aren't the right kind of person, they pass right through. If they are, they're allowed to be in your orbit, and they're only allowed to be in your orbit for as long as they're able to honor those boundaries, or unless there comes a point where they aren't needed any longer, and letting them go is the right answer. There's a boundary for that as well. Do I need to? Why am I keeping this person in my life? Is it because I need them, or because I want them? If you feel like you need them, that's a great point to really evaluate whether you should let them go or not. If you want them there, why? What kind of value are they adding to your life? Are they adding something that is going to help you enrich your life so they can enrich the lives of others? In that case, it's absolutely a good reason to keep them in your life. And if it's any other reason, it's very good to evaluate whether you should let them go, or what to do with that.
Excellent points.
I agree deeply. Great points.
I want to add something real quick. I don't know if you had something, but I do want to say this. Based on what you just said and what she just said, it sounds like people are just selective with who they want to be receptive to, and who they want to give that time and that respect and that energy to. You're just okay. So you meet certain qualifications. I can do this. You don't meet this. You don't meet that. All right. So you're not going to get all of this. And so now what we have is a bunch of people who are just being superficial and picky. No,
No,
no.
no. The
No.
reason the reason why is because the people who are in your orbit are able to be of value. That does not mean that you disvalue everyone. There is a certain level of respect that every person deserves simply for being human, a certain amount of regard that every person deserves, regardless of whether you're your best friend, your worst enemy, or anywhere in between. Regardless of what you think of them, they are human beings. And they are to be regarded as human beings, given the same respect that you would give everyone. What I'm talking about is the more focused energy that you give someone, whether they are allowed into your personal space to get to know you, whether trust is something that you are willing to demonstrate, vulnerability is something you're willing to share. This is what I'm talking about. And that's where the boundaries really take part. Am I willing to be open and vulnerable with this person? Or is this person just someone that I can regard as a human being and allow them to pass on? Pass through my orbit, and to learn, grow, and evolve to do their own thing. It's always about making sure that you have a level of respect for all people, and at the same time, the ones that really resonate with you, you do produce vulnerability, and you do use that as a basis of creating trust.
I 100% agree with Jason. Um, I always say, my grandmother always said, um, I love everyone, but my love is not for everyone, right? You have to have a certain understanding of selection when it comes to who you let that close to you, especially when it comes to interpersonal relationships. Not everyone deserves all aspects of you all the time, because that's also how you deplete yourself, right? But all human beings deserve respect, deserve kindness, deserve compassion, deserve a certain level of patience, and deserve a certain level of grace. Now, those things have to be established within yourself, and that goes into building you being the leader of whatever conversation or whatever space or whatever activity is happening, by first working within yourself, because that's self-sovereignty, right? When you're sovereign within yourself, when you are a leader, you know that no matter what situations may occur, what space that you're in, everyone deserves acknowledgement. Everyone deserves to be greeted. Everyone deserves to be respected. Everyone deserves to be heard. But when it comes to someone moving closer to you in an interpersonal way, then things have to be evaluated a lot deeper. Things like character, things like beliefs, things like, ideologies. Those things have to be evaluated, because, again, you cannot just allow everyone that close within you. Conversations, like conversing openly in open spaces, like in a Socratic way, that is fine. But then, even in those ways, you understand why the mystery schools were called mystery schools. Not everyone is able to comprehend things in this lifetime. Not everybody is meant to comprehend certain levels of information in this lifetime, right? There are those who seek, there are those who know, and there are those who teach. But there are those who want to just stay asleep. And it's very, very detrimental to yourself and others when you're forcing those who want to stay asleep to wake up, because it causes more problems than anything else. Because some people are very linear in their thinking, some people are very dogmatic, some people are very black and white. And when you try to pull them out of that, that's when that resistance comes into play. That's when that anger comes into play. It's not that you are deeming them as unworthy. They themselves, in their level of understanding, and maybe too in their spiritual growth and where their soul is at, they are not ready, right? And so in that, you have to take the meat and leave the bones. You yourself have to know when to call good good, and when to leave certain things alone, right? When to know that no matter what you say, this person's ego is triggered, right? This person's, you may never even been addressing them, you may have been addressing things in general, but you can tell someone's ego is triggered by how they approach you, and how they're talking to you, and how aggressive they start to become, right? These are egoic signs that this person is not yet ready to integrate, this person's not yet ready to learn, this person's not yet ready in this form. Again, being a leader, you learn how to, calm the situation and let that person go on their way. And but there's still a maintaining of self-respect, there's still a maintaining of respect throughout, even if that person gets to a level of disrespect within themselves. That stuff of like what someone has or what someone looks like, those kinds of things, to a true intellect, to a true philosopher, to a person who has like done the work, that's nothing. That doesn't even factor in, because you know that knowledge can be pulled from anyone and anywhere, right? You are a seeker and a teacher. You're not, the vessel is just this. It's just a vessel. It means nothing.
So just and I'm gonna give you the floor, brother, because I want to say that I don't disagree with anything that either you said. In fact, a lot of what you described was what I was approaching in my statement. I wasn't referring to um, a person who has done the homework on themselves to the point to where they identify certain characteristics within people that they meet on a daily basis, whether it's someone that's close to them or it's just someone that they have to keep at an arm's length. What I'm more so referring to is more of what you down at the bottom was referring to about specifically people who are so stuck in their ways to the point that they can't see beyond what they already know and what they've learned. So they walk around with this attitude and this poise and demeanor where you really just can't reach to them. You want to have these conversations with these people, but there's no having them because as soon as they open their mouth, you already know what you're going to get. And so my concern and my issue is, all right, when we speak about specific tangible things that go into having a dialogue with anyone, whether or not you agree or disagree, what are the pieces that are required to have these talks? Because everyone is not going to be a leader. Everyone is, some people are just happy with their 9 to 5 and just getting through the day, and other people are more charismatic and they know how to web and weave through certain situations, the traffic of the mind. Some people are just very agile at it, right? But then you just have those folks that just don't know how to slow down, take in what's being said to them, and then process it and then retort. All you have to do is slow down, get out of your own way, and relax. You might get more out of what you're trying to gain from someone if you just slow down and get out of your own ego and out of your own. It's like, I don't know. It's crazy because we speaking on boundaries too, and there's people that's been in our life that we've been very close to, and even they sometimes have a hard time communicating with you. We can't just sit here and act like everybody has found this formula to successful disagreeing and agreeing, and we can just walk our separate ways and not turn and pull from the holster. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it don't. And I think that's more or less where I'm going with it. You got the floor.
Cool. So I'm really glad you brought this up because there's a lot that I want to cover on this and things that I actually teach and coach people on directly about this. So when you say that not everyone's a leader, that's wrong because leadership does not require position. You can lead from any position because the true measure of leadership is to be of service. That is the true measure of leadership. And when you are serving, you are leading. Now, that is not, there's a big difference between being a servant leader and being subservient. Being subservient means that you see yourself as being less than and others being more important than you, or other people seeing you as less than and wanting to treat you as being less than they are. But being of service means that you see that there's an opportunity for you to help and to provide value to others. And that's really the most important piece. So you asked, how do we do that? Well, I've actually identified 5 factors that really are absolutely necessary for people to have communication that is productive and does not devolve into any kind of violence, confrontation, or conflict. And I use the acronym TABER, TABER, and it stands for transparency, autonomy, benefit, empathy, and relationship. So transparency is allowing others to really understand what it is you want to convey in all aspects, being completely transparent with your communication. That's the first thing, because without that, there is no trust. Autonomy is the understanding that people are going to make their own decisions because these are grown ass men and women. And allowing them to do that, accepting the fact that they're going to make their own decisions, is super important. It allows people to understand that they have permission to just be themselves. So with benefit, this is treating every conversation, every interaction as having be able to benefit, be of benefit to both you and them and anyone else that's involved. And it doesn't have to be something that you offer, but just something the way that you present yourself. It's the difference between being of benefit or being self-serving. With empathy, this is desire just to really the desire to understand where someone's coming from. Doesn't mean you have to know, but you have the desire to understand. And all of this is about the desire to cultivate a relationship with someone, the desire to understand more about someone than you did before, and wanting to use that as a way of creating connection and building trust. So if you don't have this, then more than likely you're doing one of the five of the other following, which I call CLIPS. And CLIPS stands for concealment, limitation, individualism, passivity, and separation. Basically, it's the exact opposite of Tabor. And people who exhibit even any one of these things, whether they're concealing their motives, they're limiting the decisions of other people, they are acting in an individualistic nature, self-serving. They are not caring about what other people think. They're being passive to the needs of others, or they want to separate themselves from others. They don't want to understand. They don't want to create trust. They want to create the separation. Any one of those five things will taint that relationship. It will corrupt it. Even just one, it will completely destroy the integrity of that relationship. So it's easy to see that it's a fragile ground, but it's so it is so fruitful when you're able to create a relationship with the right intentions, and you're able to use Tabor as a way of evaluating that the scope of that relationship, how you are conducting yourself, and how you are presenting yourself to others. Yeah. Because when you act as a leader, when you act in a way that displays yourself as a leader, there is an inherent amount of authority that you have that people see. And they will either want to interact with that, or they will say that it is not for them, and they will select themselves out, which is another great thing to do. And I yield the floor.
Jason, can you please put that in the comments, the Tabor and CLIPS?
Sure.
I intrinsically do that, but I love that acronym because that's right on the money, and I love that so much. But I agree with Jason. I think that I would say traditionally, I would say two things that are needed is emotional intelligence and critical thinking. When it comes to having certain conversations with certain kinds of people, a lot of the times with the emotional intelligence, you can assess kind of where someone is at and where the conversation is going to go, especially if they're emotionally charged, right? CLIPS, the last one, separation. CLIPS is the ego, right? The ego is always looking to make itself right. The ego is always making itself the leader. It wants to put itself in the forefront because it still wants love and admiration, but it wants to separate and individualize itself. And then two, the ego is always triggered, right? Even if situations are not talking about anything towards it in general. So then that level of transparency in being clear and stating that, hey, this is not about that, this is about this, and being able to initiate conversations with a level of both grace and service is how you start to move forward, thinking critically and being able to hear that this is what someone's saying, but this is also the meaning of this. And maybe they don't know. So let's kind of explore that a little bit more. This is not something that can happen with everyone, but it's something that you can lead if you're willing and you have the knowledge basis. You can learn how to be this kind of speaker. You can learn how to be this kind of orator, and you can learn to have these conversations. But most people are very dogmatic and egoic, and so they have these linear thinkings, and they're narrow, where they believe, okay, I know I grew up like this, and so this is the only way that it's meant to be. Because they don't question. They don't think outside of the box, and the level of emotional intelligence that they have isn't highly developed because emotions, especially in this patriarchal society, can sometimes be, a lot of the times can be seen as a weakness, right? A lot of the times can be seen as a lacking, but IQ is not measured on just 1 meter. There are different forms of intelligence. And I think a lot of the times we miss that and we don't develop ourselves as full human beings in order to be able to have these conversations or talk to people or lead people accordingly, because we're not able to understand that everyone learns and comprehends things differently. And that willingness to explore all those aspects within ourselves is what allows us to then mirror with every single person that we meet. It doesn't matter who you meet, you doesn't matter what walk of life there are, you can still see them, right? You can see the nuances that are in them. You can see the way that they're thinking. You can see that the way that they're understanding things or what they're misunderstanding, even within themselves. I've met people who I understand where they misunderstood me, and I am sitting there telling them, I understand what you mean. And I will go over exactly what they're saying and break down what they meant by what they said. I just don't agree. Right, and that's it, right? I just don't agree, and that's okay. I can hear you. Your ego is though seeking to be right, and in these conversations and in certain conversations, you have to understand there's not always just a right or a wrong, right? There's just the conversation. And sometimes you have to teach people those things. Sometimes you have to let them know that I hear you, I see you, and I understand you. My perspective and my level of understanding just differs. I can take what you said and I can recognize this in this way, but for me, these are how I feel or how I see things. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful either way. There are certain conversations that are not as nuanced, right? Like there are conversations, things like war, things like, you know, things that are happening in my country, things that are happening in Palestine, these things that are happening in the world where people try to make things complicated when it's just like you can pick up a book and look at the history. It's not that complex, right? There are complications in as far as government involvement, but as far as what is happening, if we are talking about justifiably, is this right or wrong? No, there are no complications in that. There are just people who are, again, dogmatic and linear thinking and unwilling to move themselves outside of a perspective that they are not familiar or comfortable with.
Which explains a lot of divorces. It explains hypergamy. It explains separatism. It explains this idea that we have all of these different political parties and everybody is supposed to be on one side. Everyone is for the people, but they have twists and turns to why they choose to be Democrat or why they choose to be Republican. It would explain a lot of why people and their friendships don't last very long, because what I've observed and what I've seen, I don't have to argue with you to know whether or not I'm right or wrong in the dispute. You're going to come from a stance of how you feel, and I'm going to come from a stance of how I feel. But the difference is there still has to be a resolve. Someone has to take the stance on whether or not this is worth coming to a conclusion, or we need to reevaluate what we're doing. And a lot of people waste a lot of their years dealing with people that they shouldn't be. You don't know how to vet. You don't know how to date. You don't know how to recognize a friend from enemy. You don't use discernment. A lot of the times, and one of the main things that I've noticed is people are so afraid of looking at themselves for who they really are. I'm talking about the monsters, the demons, the things that you hide and sweep under the rug that no one else knows about. And if someone identifies or recognizes it you're quick to try to run away from it or escape it, but you can't run away from yourself. And all you're doing is going through this revolving door of repeating the same habits over and over and over again, and you're not getting anywhere because you don't really understand the severity of you being so displaced and stuck in your own way. And I, I personally don't think that it should be that difficult to have a conversation with anyone. Like if you have a discomfort or disagreement, or maybe you have a critique, and I've reached out to him a few times. Hey, how do you feel about such and such? Let me know. I'll inbox you and ask you, hey, tell me the truth. What do you think about X? And you can tell me, and I'm receptive to it. I get it because the idea is to be better than what I was the day before. I'm not trying to stay stuck. In fact, I thank you, and I'm more appreciative of you being honest with me and actually telling me these things so that I don't go out here in the world looking stupid, sticking my foot in my own mouth. You got it.
There were a couple of times to actually speak on this. There are a couple of times where Melvin, you and I have had the opportunity of having discussions outside of the podcast, and with each conversation that we've had, um, my my whole purpose of that conversation was just to really pay attention to how I could be of service to you, and to really understand what I could add to the conversation, what I could add to um your point of view, or to whatever it is that we were talking about. And when people have conversations that are based on that, the desire to really understand, the desire to understand where another person is coming from, it creates opportunities for much richer interactions. And I've really enjoyed many of the conversations that we've had because they've been very um, positive. They've been very progressive in their nature. And progressive conversations are how people really get to understand another person on a much deeper level. Even if I had some advice for you, I always made sure that you understood where I was coming from, that you could appreciate what the information I was giving you, and more importantly, that you were receptive to it. And I would ask, is it okay if I provide my own personal point of view or my insights, if I give you some feedback? And just by asking that question, um, it would dispel a lot of tension that might exist, because there's there's no there's no belief that anything that I say is going to be malintended. It's not gonna be for your detriment. It's going to be something that really is meant to be of benefit to you. And I never get attached to the things that I say. I always say, your mileage may vary, and that's cool. If you have a different idea or different thought about this, go with that. And it's not going to hurt me none. And that's the kind of interaction I strive to have with everyone that I interact with. There are some people, admittedly, that I have needed to separate myself from because they are about as healthy as arsenic. And making sure to keep them at least at arm's length, if not longer, because they were not helpful. They were not positive. They did not add anything to my experience, and I had nothing to offer to them for their experience. And I think it is these two things: the desire to be of service to someone, and then also having the wherewithal to understand where you cannot be, and acknowledging both as being realities. and responding to both in kind. Those who you can be a benefit to, be a benefit to. And those you cannot, wish well and get the hell out of their orbit.
I agree. I agree with both of you. Like what Jason was saying and what you were saying, like level of understanding. I think I lead all conversations with a deep level of understanding, a desire to understand, and showcasing that with people. It's because it lowers their guard, but it's also to showcase there is no ego here. I'm not seeking to be right. There is no right or wrong here. There's simply just understanding, right? I am simply just coming here to bear witness to you, and you're here to bear witness to me, and we're here to grow together, right? Either we're growing together as human beings or we're growing apart. But I can recognize in you what is amazing or what is strong or what is great, what points are there. And if you are open to that feedback, I can be both constructive, but I can always be constructive, but I never focus on being destructive, right? My words are meant to give life, not destroy. And these are principles that I grew up with in Africa, and how women are raised in my country and where I'm from. And so I tend to find most of the time when I'm talking to men here, they're very shocked and they're very confused, because everything that Jason was talking about, the patience and the desire of wanting to understand you and giving you the space to explain yourself and to hear you out and to highlight, well, thank you for sharing what you said. I heard that you said this and that was really great and amazing. And, or you said this. And, I think that that's such a beautiful part of yourself that you see, and blah, 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 blah. Even with discussing a situation or a problem, you're holding yourself at a certain level of decorum because you want your message to be very clear and received. There is no emotion behind, especially if it's something that needs to be closed or ended. The emotion of like wrathfulness or pettiness or degradation, you don't need to come to that space, because you already know in how you lead that you're above it. And they know in how you're addressing them that you're above it. And no matter where they take you or try to take the conversation, it can never go into that space with you, maybe with someone else, because you're above it. And you live past that space within yourself that you need to prove your intelligence or prove your worth or prove who you are. I don't even like when people identify with things like, oh, I'm a bad person, or I'm a good person, or I'm this, especially I'm bad, I did bad, because that's a form of escapism. We're looking at the issue. We're not judging you or labeling you. We're looking at the issue and trying to understand behaviors, right? Why are these behaviors? Where did this program come from? What are the beliefs that you have around these behaviors? And when did this first start showing up for you, right? And then working on tools on how to decompress and like readdress these behaviors so we can build up positive and more healthy behaviors, whether it's in a work environment, whether that's in a relationship, whether that's in just in society as a whole. How people address me and how people talk to me, that's important, but how I talk back and how I address them, that's the most important. That can neutralize so much. I've neutralized disrespect in instances just on how I choose to show up and how I choose to answer them and let them know that certain things are not necessary, right? You can get my attention, or you can talk to me, or you can do these things with me without these kind of behaviors happening, right? And still letting them have that space without causing shame, right? Or creating a need to step on or admit, like broadcast this authoritative, presence. Like, no, right? That simply just comes about based off of who you are, how you've chosen to live your life, and how you chose to be in your day in and day out, right? Talking to the mom and pa down the street, talking to the lady in the mailroom, talking to the janitor, talking to everyone. A lot of us say that we view everyone the same and give everybody the same level of respect, but that really comes into play in how we discourse, right? How we look at people, how we address people, how we give people our attention, right? There are those boundaries where we have time or obligations, but we also know how to say, hey, I have this thing coming up, and right now you have all my time and attention, but I do have this obligation. Can we follow up with this a little bit later? Or can we, you know, change this to another hour? It is a lot to do with your own personal healing, your own personal work, your own personal journey, and also too the fundamentals in which you were raised in. Were you raised in an argumentative space? Were you raised with a need to constantly feel like you need to be right? Were you raised in a space where you were hyper defensive all the time, right? And can you identify these programs within yourself and deprogram yourself to now come into a space of, of love or of tabor, right? Like being able to address things from that space.
You know what bothers me the most? When I get on social media and when I see panelists of men hosting women or just in that area, you don't ever see the conversations going like this. It starts off like this, and then what they end up doing is kind of contorting the truth, and they start adding and mixing statistics and opinions, and then they sprinkle a little bit of slurs in there to ignite and initiate a certain emotion out of a woman, or they're asked these generalized questions that's designed to pin man versus woman or man versus man in a way to where it's supposed to turn into a confrontation and an argument, and it's really set up to make one or the other person look stupid for the whole point of entertainment. And so then it's like every time you see someone on one of these shows, the woman is always coming off as if they are unintelligent and they don't know how to articulate, or they don't know how to speak at all. They just ratchet and from the hood and yam 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 yam. It's always those type of people that they have spread all over social media, and then you got men and women that's looking from our point of view, and we're like, what is going on here? Are people really made like this? Are people really like this? I've asked myself this a number of times. Are people really this ignorant or that deluded or that lost? And then I have to come back and realize that there's an agenda behind a lot of the content that people put out here on display for the world. I'm not saying that there's not people who move and operate like that. And there was one other point that I wanted to address too, which I thought was completely dope. Jason said it. Um, but you both expanded on it. And it was you created a space where there was no doubt or question that you were coming from a place of this is a safe environment for anyone who wants to be in it. And that right there is one of the elements that I was reaching for, and you brought it to the forefront, creating that space and that opportunity for the person in front of you to look at it, and before they make a move or engage in their primal way of thinking or how they're used to handling a certain situation that's not foreign to them, you've ultimately cut the bullshit, for lack of better words. Like if you're someone who's used to being around hood people all the time, and you get into an environment where people don't talk like that, your outlook is going to be way different. You're probably not really going to know how to handle that too well. Or if you grew up and all you know how to do is argue and go back and forth with somebody, but the other person is calm and collected, and they rather have a solution to the problem, you're not going to know how to deal with that. And so, realistically, this is more of a self check type of a thing for a lot of us, including myself. I still have to work on it. I ain't all the way there, but I understand too that the boundaries are important, that you do have to be able to know when to push and when to back off. So, and some fights and some battles are just not yours. I can come to you as collected and calm, and a lot of people don't do that I notice is that if you have a dispute or whatever's happening, there's never the all right, this is what happened. The reason why this is happening is because of X, Y, and Z. This is what led up to this conversation here. No one does that specifically. You kind of just go straight into it. You're angry or you're frustrated or you're not even thinking, all right, I'm confronting this person about whatever it is, but maybe they don't really understand what I'm talking about. Maybe they don't even care. Maybe they don't even want to know. Maybe they already know and you're just wasting your breath. But for your own peace of mind, you got to be more clear and more specific about your intentions, why you're there, how far this needs to go, and where it needs to stop.
There are two things that you had said that I really want to focus on. The first one was the element of safety. I love how you brought that up. And it's really important to understand that no one can make you feel safe. That is an illusion. People are looking for others to make them feel safe. That's not possible. Safety is a condition that is created when two people believe that it is okay to show vulnerability and build trust. It's not something that one proves to another. It is an invitation that's created that allows people to build trust with each other. That's what safety is. And the way that you describe that is exactly what I try to do with every single interaction that more people should try to do. Brene Brown talks about how vulnerability is one of the first things that we look for in others, and the last thing we're willing to show ourselves. And it creates a dynamic that it's untenable. It's impossible to say, prove to me that you're someone that I can trust, without being able to prove it yourself, without being able to provide or take that first step, extend the hand across the table, so to speak, being willing to provide that. The second thing that you talked about, and I think I just lost a train of thought, is actually, I'm going to stop right there because I lost it. So, Mark, please feel free to speak as well.
No, I do agree that provision of safety, Safety is an illusion, and it has to be something that's shared between two people, and that willingness to happen to share that the vulnerability between the two of you is what creates a safe space. I think that I try to embody a safe space because Marian Hasana talks about doing all things with love, leading conversations with love, leading conflicts with love, leading situations with a spirit of love. That helps neutralize a lot of the conflict or a lot of the issue in a lot of people's heart, because even when there is a misunderstanding that someone may have or a misinterpretation of action, the come through, your come through, whatever it is that you do, even outside of conversation, even if it's prayer, even if it's school, your come through, your come from, that's the most important piece, because that sets the tone for every situation that you're going to experience. And even when someone is illusionary about the love that they're trying to have as well, because you have people who are pseudo spiritual, or you have people who are pseudo intellectual, and they're going to be like, oh, peace, light, love, and butterflies, blah, 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 blah. They can always feel that when they're in the presence of real love, when they're in the presence of real understanding, when they're in the presence of real, real divinity or real kindness, because it's not something that can be faked. It's not something that can just be regurgitated or falsified. And even in that, experiencing different aspects of culture coming here to America, growing up in the suburbs and going to predominantly white institutions, and then still making friends and meeting different people that are African Americans and being in different African American spaces, white spaces, Hispanic spaces. A lot of the time, I think the difference is that people are looking to find a reason not to like you, initially, unless you give them a reason not to like you, right? Like, unless your mentality is always, I'm going to lead this space, I'm going to lead this situation with love, and you're able to neutralize a lot of things with, okay, there's this man that doesn't like me and I'm a man and he's looking at me funny, instead of just sitting there and having a stare off. Hey, what's up, man? my name is my name is Jason. What's your name? Great. Where are you from? I'm from blah blah blah. Yeah, I just got here. I love the space. How do you feel about it? Yeah, it's a great space. You know what, man? Let me get you a drink, right? Demobilize that energy instantly. A lot of people like the idea of someone disliking them. People in their power know that that is also a form of it's dangerous, but most importantly, why does that need to exist if our whole point is unification, right? If there are people that naturally dislike you, that's their business, right? You can't save everyone, and you can't fix everyone, and you can't change everyone's opinions of you, especially when you're living in your truth. But anyone who has an encounter of you or with you, they have a will of like a undeniable testament of your character. So in the rooms that you are not in, there will at least be one person that is willing to die behind you, to defend you, or to speak up on your behalf, because your character speaks. Every single time your character has been consistent, who you've shown up as has been consistent, and leading situations and conversations with love is the most important thing. Those podcasts that you had mentioned, and I had seen them, especially in my early 20s when it really started booming, and people would always be having these podcasts that are so divisional, and they're they're constantly picking women that are not what they deem as intellectuals, and women that have certain occupations that they demoralize and they look down on, and they're just there to prove a point. That's exactly what those are. None of those are not actual conversations. Those are ego strokes, right? Like, those are those people, the ones leading the conversation, simply just using a neutralized playing field to just build up their ideas of self, or, oh, look at these things, so now I'm right, when they could easily go to college campuses of women who are intelligent, or go to schools and find women that are intelligent, or go online, you found me, of women who are higher intellect, or just don't know what my intelligence is like, maybe all the way, but you can see that there is more nuance being nuanced thought to who I am, and then you bring me on, and then you're like, oh, okay, or you have conversations and you have, okay, there's a vetting process that goes into it. If you were really serious about what you're doing, if you were really serious about your work, if you were really serious about building masculinity and having the masculine converse with the feminine and unify. But that's not the case, right? The case is these people that are in their most basal instinct because they're functioning from their limbic system, all they talk about are the most basic things, right? The things that are most important to someone that is in fight or flight: sex, money, food, and shelter. 50-50. Who's paying the rent? Who's cooking the food in the house? Who's the provider of the food? What is a man's role? What is a woman's role? But intrinsically, if you already know these things and you function in these things, those kind of conversations don't, they're not even important. Those, it's not even a thought, because you've already evolved past that. Emotionally and intellectually, you've evolved past that. So now you're allowed to have more nuanced conversations. Those conversations are simply people who are in their most basal spaces, appealing to people who are also in their most basal spaces due to trauma, due to genetic impressions that are being done onto them unknowingly in programming. They're stuck in those spaces. So those are the conversations that they have at home. Those are the conversations that they have with their girlfriends. Those are the conversations that they have all together, right? They don't have conversations outside of that because that's not what they know, right? Imagine someone like one of us popping up into one of those podcasts. You think it's going to be a fun time for them? It's not. They're going to be like, you can never bring these guys here again. They're not here. They're not here to have fun, because everything that they say will be diverted, right? There's more nuance, there's more thought. They're not willing to think outside of that or be challenged outside of what they believe to be principle, because they believe it to be principle. They are only there to prove a point, not to listen to multiple points. Oh, I can.
While you're speaking, I actually was able to remember what I wanted to say as the second point, which has to do with the idea of curiosity. The more curious you are, and Mark, you had expressed this beautifully. The more curious you are, the more invitation you give to create trust. Because especially when it's genuine curiosity, without any agenda, it becomes the most purest form of building trust. It's a desire to get to know someone. It's a desire to understand a different point of view, a different perspective. And that curiosity is what fuels the ability to create relationships and fuels the ability to communicate effectively.
What I want to add, if you really want to be completely honest, if you really want to have these conversations, because there are thousands and thousands of men and women who do have issues or need help in certain areas. If you really want to have these discussions and you're trying to warn one over the other about all of the fallacies and all of the pitfalls that come with dealing with certain things, that if that's really what you desire to do, you're doing a disservice to these people. You're charging hundreds of dollars for your leadership conversations, your Patreon. You're cutting down and you're tearing down men and women. I think shaming and holding people accountable is important, but at the expense of trying to humiliate people, also that you can garner the admiration of your viewership, because quite frankly, you're preying on people who are emotionally, spiritually, and mentally almost self-checked out, where they rely on certain spaces to give them some type of edification that's going to feed their vessel in some type of positive way. You're not really helping them at all. You're toying around with them by bringing OnlyFans models up here and these $1 million connoisseurs. You're putting them in this illusion to look at certain things a way that is completely garbage. I don't agree with a lot of the things that they speak on. It's still all of this still ties into conversing and things of that nature. And the only reason I brought that whole podcasting red pill, blue pill thing up was because that's what they are there for. They're there to do what we're doing, except they're being completely irresponsible, in my opinion. The way that they handle their topics, the way that they kind of invite certain people. So you'll bring up a OnlyFans model, but you won't bring up one of your fans, one of your supporters who spend hundreds and thousands of dollars every month on your platform. You won't bring them up. You don't even talk to them in the comment section, but you'll bring an OnlyFans model up. So really, it's a business transaction. The OnlyFans, you hold on. Let me get in my bag real quick. I'm gonna turn it over. Let's cut the bullshit. You know these guys are lonely. They don't have love in their life like they would like to. And so what you're doing is you're throwing the bait out there. You're putting these women on display with these platforms, knowing that your audience is male based. And if you can get promotion for these OnlyFans girls, you're going to get a percentage out of not only their business, but you're going to get a percentage from the viewership coming in because they're going to be paying to want to talk to these women. They're going to want their information. They're going to want to know how to contact these people. So you're not really honestly looking to have the conversations that you're trying to have with these folks. And it goes back to a lot of what Jason said, especially with clips. These people display that all the time. But because you have a certain status, you feel as though that you can talk down to people and treat people a certain way because you make X amount of money, and it's bull. And a lot of people either you caught on to what they're doing, or you're just in need of some real honest guidance. I'm not talking about someone that's in a cult and they're trying to just lead you off a cliff. Someone who really cares about your well-being and they want to see you do better. And a lot of these people are out for themselves. So I don't know.
You brought up something about this that until now I hadn't really thought of. The idea that the reason why they have these people up is because there is a benefit, the transactional benefit that takes place, which honestly makes the process even more disgusting. It makes the intention so self-serving, and it's for entertainment only. There's really nothing, there isn't much value there. By and I know the podcasts that you're talking about because I used to follow them, and I used to be like, okay, all right. And there's only one that I can think of where he actually did anything to bring to light the the behavior and how it is so disruptive to the what Jordan Peterson calls the human enterprise, the advancement of the human race, and the things that some people do, it's counter to that, and so it needs to be called out, it needs to be um, addressed in some way. The way he did it when he was doing it, it wasn't necessarily the best way, but it was the only way that he knew how, and I get that. But in regards to the many of the podcasts that I've seen using only fan models and using people who have a distinguished following, it's even more self-serving than I initially thought. And it's like, God damn, this is gross. It is not providing any kind of real value at all, and it's just really, I find it to be disheartening and a little bit disappointing. But I really appreciate you saying what you said about that, because I do see the truth in that. And yeah, it's appreciate you.
Yeah, that was my first time ever hearing someone use that take, especially thinking about it in a business way, because it does make you look at it in a more marketing sense, like marketing as well, because you ask yourself for years a lot of the time why they don't have more nuanced guests. Joe Rogan really set the tone for his podcast with having all types of guests, like naturists, philosophers, musicians, all these different things, because if you're trying to really have varied conversations, then you should have varied guests. And if you're trying to, you yourself as the host, grow along with the conversation, then you should be having people on that are going to challenge you, or you should be looking into their material beforehand and have questions prepared for them material wise in order for you to have a really cohesive conversation. But a lot of the time those things are just for entertainment and shock value. It's cheap stuff, like they're cheap jokes or cheap hits. It wants you to look at things in your most basal level and look at people in the most basic way, because if it was really about supplementing growth within masculine or within the feminine, then they should have been talking about truly applicable things, skill sets or books. They're not ever mentioning real books, real literature, real lectures, right? I've been waiting for years to hear someone say, "Oh, King Warrior and Magician and Lover, it's a great book for you to start with understanding masculine archetypes," but that's more so in like Jungian philosophy, or more of the academic realm, but not in the mainstream. And I think a lot of that has to do with what sells is usually what's cheap, right? Like what's the cheapest aspects of ourselves. That's what makes people buy cheap thrills, sex, money, gossip. That for a lot of people sells, right? It takes time to build a platform like Joe's. It takes time to have these amazing guests come through and talk. But even the most, who at that time felt themselves to be peculiar, like the McKenna brothers, were able to connect with such huge audiences of people. Dr. Bruce Lipton, like such huge audiences, and give more nuanced thought and idea to things, and change a lot of people's lives for the positive over time. And it may not have hit a million in that first clip, but over time people found that, and it started to create a following. And I think that the integrity aspect within the individuals is what's like you're saying, is the missing key components. And if more people just started saying these people have no integrity, these people are doing these for cheap hits and cheap thrills, these people don't care about you, instead of engaging with the content, like just disarm it. Like just name it for what it is and just make it clear, right? Like this is not good for us. This is not, constructive for us. There's no reason for people to even engage. Like I've never found a point to engage in any of those conversations. I don't like to be saying like things, all people are equal, but certain things are beneath me. And those kind of rhetoric and those kind of conversations, that's beneath me, right? A person who knows themselves doesn't need to even discuss those kinds of things, because you have other things to do. You're over here solving the equation of deep space and matter and trying to manifest the celestial into the physical being. You're over here trying to change the way that systems operate and bring in a new healthy way of thinking for the collective. You don't have time to talk about 50-50. that's not that's not your realm. That's not your space. And if someone does approach you with that, you let them know that there are better things to talk about. Do you understand that? Like, there are more conversations to be had, and you seeking that is you seeking something cheap.
It is all a marketing scheme. There are so many sick people out here. When I talk about sick, I'm not talking about I'm not talking about snotty nose, and I'm talking about people who are diagnosed or need to be diagnosed, or they just don't have the right outreach. So the way they handle things are very dangerous to themselves and to the people around them, because of there's roots of issues that they've never addressed. And the folks that have this responsibility, you mishandle it. You don't do what you're supposed to do with it. You're capitalizing off of people's pain and suffering, and you're disguising it as being genuinely there to support them in any way that you possibly can. And a lot of you guys are full of shit. And I'll look at your shows, I'll listen to the way you talk, I'll listen to what you cover, why you cover it. The majority of these podcasts are based around relationships. I don't know the percentage, but I almost am certain that they outweigh the laws of physics. I'm pretty certain that there's way more conversations about relationships than there are about oil rigs and truckers going up and down the highway. Why is that? Why are they so focused on that versus everything else?
Because relationships
And
are the
why?
key to everything. Relationships are the key to everything. That's why. Relationships are what drive the human existence. And so it is a hot button topic. It is more important, it is the most vital and most important thing that people can really understand. And it's still a mystery to most people, but it is vital to how we as a species survive and thrive. There, I've come to understand that humanity is based on three pillars. And those three pillars are procreation, building community, and developing moral worth. And in every single one of those cases, with every single one of those pillars, it is not a vacuum. It requires the cooperation of at least one or more other people in order to be successful in every single one of those pillars. The human experience is a relationship game. And so if you're not talking about relationships, you're really not talking about anything, because everything that we do that is of value requires a relationship.
I think with Jason, like, we're talking about like the other relationships, the more nuanced relationships, family relationships, non-romantic relationships. In these podcasts, they're hyper focused on romantic relationships. Like, everything is a relationship, and it is important to look at all of the relationships in your life, and not only just the romantic relationships, and not only pedestaling the romantic relationships as the one important relationship in your life. And I think a lot of these podcasts are super hyper focused, especially between male and female gender. Of course, there are of like the same sex, but a lot of these conversations are mostly just about like romantic relationships. They don't talk about the nuances of friendship or community, the importance, especially the importance of community. um, that's one that I completely see lacking a lot of the times, is how to build a community, how to maintain a community, how communities work, especially coming from a communal culture. You don't see them talking about them. They're always just talking about a man and a woman and a man, always.
And because that is a very popular topic, because that's on everyone's mind, and that is it sells really easily. I mean, the whole idea that sex sells is absolutely true. Whether you are actually talking about the act or you're talking about the interaction of two people that leads to the act, it's all about the same thing. But it's because the reason why this is so popular is because it is the most powerful instinct of the human experience, and it's easily corrupted because it's people talk about it in a way that, while it is still the same topic, they're talking about it in a way that it insults the mechanism. And by isolating just one little part of it, which is just the act of having sex, not even in a way that produces any kind of result, just the act of having sex, which, I mean, while it's fun, it doesn't really do anything. It's something that people love talking about, probably because there's still a little bit of taboo that's attached to it, but also because it's fun and exciting. But they talk about it in a way that has really, um, it has um, reduced it to a moment, and they aren't seeing it for the greater thing that it really is, because that's not exciting. It's boring. There's no um, there's no real focus there, because once you start talking about that, you have to start talking about everything else about the human experience. You have to include everything else that brings about the positive qualities of the human experience, and they don't want to deal with that because sex and violence sell the most.
Yes, it's the cheapening. It's the cheapening of everything. It's the cheapening of
Absolutely. Yep.
our relationships. It's the cheapening of our conversations. It's bringing down something like the law of gender, that divine feminine, divine masculine has no physical form, right? They're just energies. Making that prevalent into one gendered being and saying that you're not in your divine if you're not XYZ doing these things, which are in the material. You're talking about spirit in the material. That doesn't make any sense. Instead of talking about the internal work that a man has to go through, or the internal work that a woman has to go through. And there are spiritual podcasts, and there are more critical thinking, philosophical podcasts. Those are the ones that I follow. I don't like following people who are just looking at the external as an evaluation of the internal work, because it's not. People do shortcuts all the time, right? We see people lie, we see people cheapen things, we see people, do shortcuts and pretend like they actually have done the work. No, the work, the internal work, the actual work isn't glamorous. It's not beautiful. It doesn't ride in Rolls Royces. It's not driving luxury cars. Not yet, but the journey, but even then, as the journey continues, the desire for most of those things lessen, right? Because the desire is human connection. That is the true desire. That is the basal desire. Yes, we are spiritual beings having a material experience, and with that, we're going to need material things during this experience. But there's a difference between a need or things that you're buying because it's intrinsic to your soul and your spiritual expression, versus you looking to have these things as a form of validation from other people, and you having those things make other, knowing that your ego knows that these things are going to be seen as pretty or respected or revered by other people, so it's going to position you into a higher place in the eyes of the collective. Like, There are a lot of silent billionaires in the world. There are a lot of quiet, wealthy people in the world, and it's not just because they're running away from taxes, that too, but because they also understand that not everyone, what you work for wasn't for the entertainment of everyone. What you've done in your life to like ascertain these levels of power or wealth and access wasn't for the public. It was for you and your family. It was something that your soul endeavored for. And now that this mission is completed, you're enjoying it in the privacy of your family, of your close knit people as you wanted. There was nothing to prove to the collective. And a lot of the times, the most cheapest people are constantly the ones trying to prove something to the collective.
Another thing that came to mind as you were speaking was the idea that with with the topic of talking about life as a whole, one thing you also have to talk about is death. And this is a topic that people they resist talking about with a violent passion. And it's something that is inevitable. The most common cause of death is birth. And you have to understand that you were born with an expiration date. And so if all you're doing is looking at the short term ideas of what your life means, what you can do, what you can get, there is something that is lost. That there is like you said, a cheapening of life, but it also means that there is this idea of, so what have I really done? When I'm called to account, what is it that I've really done? Have I done something that is going to live beyond me, a legacy that I've created that is going to benefit humanity? Or have I just lived for myself, where my existence, my memory is going to be just a blip? And as soon as I was alive, I've been forgotten.
Here's so we talking about communication, what is lacking, what needs to be more introduced, what we need to focus on it. These individuals who have this outlet, you're communicating to people in a demonic way, at least from my perspective. Because anytime that you're using your messages to control, manipulate, and guide someone into an ideology that is contrary to what the word says, to me is a form of witchcraft. Anytime you can tell someone that the Bible is true, but because we live in 2024, so if you want to follow the doctrine, you can, but realistically, people are operating outside of the word. So I'd advise you to adjust to the worldly way of living versus operating from the spiritual sense. You, by definition, are leading people down a road of destruction. You're communicating, but I don't necessarily know if you're doing it from the place that you think you're doing it from. And that's why communicating is so important. Your message, how you deliver it, who you're talking to, the point you're trying to get across. All of these things really hold a lot of weight, and a lot of people sleep on it. You don't respect it and you don't honor it. You don't have the same level of appreciation for what a person is trying to convey to you because you can see beyond your superficial way of thinking and living. All you're looking at is the aesthetics. But I have one more question for both of you. If you could talk to somebody right now who didn't have the ability to have a rational discussion with someone that they may or may not agree with without coming to ad hominems and attacking the person's integrity, what would you advise them to do? How would they implement or utilize different measures to incorporate in their everyday dialogue when they're dealing with someone that they may or may not just always get along with?
I would first ask them, what is it that you're seeking? Are you seeking to be understood? Are you seeking understanding to happen? What are you seeking? Because first and foremost is your come from. Where are you coming from in this conversation, and what would you like to see happen? Because the shared end goal between them and another person will be one of the biggest focuses throughout the conversation, and primarily for them, so that whatever happens, they're not diverted onto another path. And then it is a lot of clarity and honesty within the conversation, and language. I think a lot of people use a lot of coarse language in the guise of like being real, keeping it honest. But I think you can be yourself without being unnecessarily crass. Like, I think you can just say, hey, um, I would like to have I would like to talk about this issue that I'm seeing, and be transparent, right, in the message that you're bringing, in the way that you're coming across. And then you are just at that point listening, right? I think asking questions of where they're at should be the primary focus first, before you bring up where you're at and how you're feeling. Because I think, again, perspective is a huge thing in hearing of, okay, why these behaviors have been happening, or how they feel about the situation. And then you can also see if they even see themselves. Do they see themselves? Do they see what they're doing? Are you talking to someone who is in their power, or are you talking to someone who's still a victim? Right? Because a lot of the times, a lot of us are talking to people who are still victims of the past, victims of situations, victims of systems, victims of relationships. They're a victim. And so it's really hard to tell a victim that, you know you might be the villain in the situation. Or even better is like, you're contributing to something that is bringing down the downfall of your own being and self-worth, and to the shared being and self-worth of both of us. Of course, recognize how they feel and recognize maybe where they're coming from. And then in that too, share your come from and where you're feeling, right? Always lead with love, lead with understanding, lead with wisdom, lead with love, and lead with grace, right? Being able to recognize the other person's feelings and emotions, being able to hear what they have to say, but also being able to address where you are coming from and where your perspective is, and what you've seen, and maybe too what you would like to see moving forward, your desire, right? It's not always going to be perfect, and it's not going to always work perfectly with everyone, but it is going to be impactful, right? Even people that I haven't had the most, um, well, I feel like every conversations that I've had have been progressive, whether they liked it or not, because I'm not going to let us perseverate over things that are not making sense. Because again, we're solution based. We want to move forward, and we want to have an end goal and reach that goal together. And so, how do we come together in order to get there? What level of understanding needs to be had, and maybe what boundaries need to be implemented between you and that other person in order for you to coexist? Or if you just decide that maybe this is not healthy for both of us, finding a way to part ways in a mutually amicable and respectful sense. Not everything is going to be perfect. Not everyone is going to want to leave you without having the last laugh or saying something snide or saying something dirty. But again, that has to be where you are solid within yourself and your foundation within yourself is strong. That's what I would that's what I would say. Jason.
I think the thing that I would do is I would seek to understand their experience, like what the experience was for them. I would listen and I would gain their perspective and find out what the reason was that they had the experience that they had. Because everyone does things only when there's a reason, even if that reason is false or imagined. And it is so important to be able to understand what the reason is. Because by understanding the reason, you have a better chance of being able to connect with the person. You begin to really understand how they got to where they are and what made them uh, um, choose options, make decisions that brought them to that place that they are, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, whatever. What were the decisions that they made, and why were those decisions made? And then the only other thing I would ask them is, do they want to do anything different? Because unless they want to do something different, there's no point in me trying to help them with anything different. They have to want it. And I think those are really the first two things that I would address before I said anything else. Understanding where they came from and if they want a different experience.
Exceptional answers and responses from both of you. I love both responses. Um, you would think it would be that simple. Hmm. Unfortunately, it's not. You gotta kind of go with the flow with that. I hope by the end of the stream that someone got something out of this. I know I certainly did. One, because moving forward, when I even begin to talk to someone, I'm going to identify whether or not this is going to go anywhere or not. And I'm going to move accordingly. I tend to stay in it longer than I should. Sometimes you really have to back out of it. You don't need to go down that alley. So, man, text me those email. Well, yeah, text me those. Was it clips? It was clips and papers. It was one of the two. Um, I want to keep those locked in my mind, man. I
Yeah,
love those
tabor and clips.
acronyms. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, when you get a chance, just send it my way. I'm gonna definitely post that. Um, words of the wise from man and woman. Every single woman who gets in front of these platforms are not Wilma from the Flintstone. They need to stop with that. Really, they need to quit that. There is we can be civilized folks. We can talk and be cordial and have our pushback and this and the third and still be able to come out the end of it learning something from it. It's not that difficult. But I want to say thank you to both of you. This is probably one of the longest streams that we've done, and every single minute was worth it from the start to the finish. I hope, Mark, that you got out of this what you needed to in terms of the dialogue, in terms of the maturity. Even though my brother up here is still working on, a couple. I still got a head cold. Pardon me, but overall, I hope you enjoyed yourself, Jason. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to have you on, bro. The more and more you pull up, man, the more and more I see you getting better and better and brighter and brighter, man. I love the transformation, bro. I do. I'm dead serious. Mark, you just natural at this. You can't convince me otherwise. You know, another lifetime you must have been doing this.
I have not, but I'm really glad to be on this platform. I think it's also given me a lot of courage to try to also learn how to do this on my own and have more conversations like this, because you are right, there's a flood of nonsense, and I think that there does need to be more great conversations, more nuanced conversations, and more expansive conversations in the world. And I'm so thankful to Jason. I loved Tabor, and I love Clips, and I just love how you were able to formulate that in such a concise way, especially, a person who's living and embodying that every day. I was like, yeah, that's an ashe. Like, I really love that. And that's so genius. I'm definitely going to be sharing that as well. And like giving that format to a lot of my friends and family when they're having conversations as well, too. Instead of leading with Clips, lead with Tabor.
That's right. Um, whether you know it or not, Mark, we've become friends. So you just have to deal with that. Um,
That's
um,
awesome.
Melvin, as always, it's great to be on this platform. Being able to experience the many different personalities you have on here is really a joy.
Amen and amen again. Um, Shout out to you guys. Shout out to everybody in the chat. To everybody that hung out with us. If you want to contact anyone on the panel, I will make sure that you are directly connected to them. Um, they're not hard to find. We come on every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday is the after hours. If you want to pull up, you know where I'm at. This platform is for everybody. It's not just a specific group of people. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter if you are a big channel or a small channel. If you have a voice and you want to share your thoughts and your opinions and you are respectful, but you are also transparent about where you're going with your direction, then you are more than welcome to join. No one is better than the next person here. That being said, this is Assembly of Excellence saying peace, blessings to everyone. I hope you all have a blessed night, that you sleep well, and that your remaining week or what's left of it is prosperous in every way, shape, form, or fashion. You guys enjoy your evenings. Can't go
Good
without
night.
the
Have a great evening, guys.
Take care.